There are moments in the lives of stars when the boundary between art and reality fades in the most haunting way. No one could have imagined that the lyrics they sang, the roles they played, or the blockbuster moments that lived only on stage and screen would later mirror their own tragic endings. In the world of entertainment, numerous Black singers, actors, rappers, and cultural icons passed away in ways their work seemed to eerily foreshadow. The 11 stories I'm about to share are chilling proof of that, deaths made unforgettable by the shocking coincidence of art and fate colliding as one. Stay with us, because these stories are as heartbreaking as they are impossible to ignore. Brook Benton. Brook Benton, the velvet baritone whose ballads felt heavy with sorrow, left this world in the rain, his final moments eerily echoing the lyrics that once defined him. Born Benjamin Franklin P. Benton possessed one of the rarest voices in R&B and soul, a deep, unhurried baritone that slowed time itself, allowing emotion to linger and haunt listeners long after the last note faded. Over decades, he carved out an extraordinary career with dozens of hits, but one song rose above them all, Rainy Night in Georgia. That record carried his name far beyond the charts. It became a symbol of loneliness, quiet despair, and the ache of feeling abandoned in a vast, indifferent world. In an industry where one misstep could erase a career overnight, Benton stood firm, delivering more than 50 hits with unwavering consistency. Yet his life would end in a way no one could have imagined, one that mirrored the somber spirit he poured into that timeless song. On April 9, 1988, during a relentless rainstorm, Brook Benton died at the age of 56. The cause was complications from meningitis that led to severe pneumonia. His lungs filled with fluid. Each breath became a struggle. Air no longer moved freely. The suffocating sensation crept in slowly, layer by layer, as if the rain from Rainy Night in Georgia was no longer falling outside, but flooding directly into his chest. In his final days, Benton was no longer framed by studio lights or applause. Instead, there were hospital rooms, breathing machines, and an oppressive silence. The infection spread rapidly, drowning his lungs from within as respiratory failure closed in. His body, once powered by that rich, commanding voice, gradually lost the strength to fight back. Death arrived quietly, behind a curtain of rain, eerily aligned with the cold, wet sadness he had once described so vividly in song. What unsettled many was not just the medical explanation, but the haunting coincidence. Years earlier, Benton had sung about a world soaked in rain, about a heaviness pressing down on the human soul. In the end, he passed away with lungs overwhelmed by fluid, his body quite literally drowned from the inside. Music critics later called it an unconscious prophecy, one he had unknowingly delivered long before his final breath. After his death, Rainy Night in Georgia never stopped playing. It was replayed, covered, and endlessly analyzed. And every time that melody returns, it becomes harder to separate the song from the fate of the man who gave it life. What began as a commercial hit evolved into a quiet elegy, a lasting period at the end of a remarkable life. Brook Benton spent his career singing of loneliness, and in the end, he departed in the same gloomy atmosphere he once painted so beautifully with his warm, unforgettable voice. Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson, the stage king who collapsed mid-lyric while singing about a crying heart. His name once made arenas erupt the moment he stepped into the spotlight. It was no coincidence they called him Mr. Excitement. With a powerful, soaring voice drenched in emotion and razor-sharp dance moves, Wilson created a performance blueprint that generations would follow. From soul legends to global pop icons, his influence is undeniable. A string of hits carried him to the top, with Lonely Teardrops standing out as a striking paradox. It was a song about heartbreak, tears, and a wounded heart, yet delivered at a fast, joyful tempo that made people dance while they ached. No one imagined that this very song would mark the point of no return. On September 29, 1975, Jackie Wilson took the stage at a music venue in New Jersey. Everything unfolded as it always had. Lights flashed. The band kicked in. His body moved with electric precision, flooding the room with energy. Lonely Teardrops rang out, and the crowd was instantly hooked. Jackie sang, danced, and sweated, pouring out every ounce of himself, just as he had his entire career. Then came the climax. As he reached the lyric about a heart crying out, his body suddenly stiffened. His rhythm faltered. His steps lost time. And then he collapsed. It happened in a split second, but the reaction was anything but quiet. Cheers erupted. Applause thundered. Many believed it was just another dramatic flourish, perfectly in character for Mr. Excitement. Seconds passed. Jackie Wilson didn't rise. That's when the truth hit. This wasn't theater. This was real. Chaos swallowed the room. The show stopped cold. Wilson was rushed away in critical condition. The heart attack didn't claim his life immediately, but what followed was even more devastating. His brain had been deprived of oxygen for too long. The damage was severe. He slipped into a deep coma, and when he finally emerged, the man who awoke was no longer the man who had ruled the stage. For nearly 9 years, Jackie Wilson remained in a vegetative state, motionless, silent, cut off from the music that had once been his very breath. Mr. Excitement survived only in memory. The artist who once shook stages now lived in complete stillness. No singing, no dancing, just a body kept alive by machines. In 1984, Jackie Wilson died at just 49 years old, closing one of the most heartbreaking chapters in entertainment history. His collapse while singing about a crying heart gave Lonely Teardrops a haunting new meaning. What was once an upbeat hit became a cruel prophecy. In that brief moment on stage in 1975, art and reality collided, a heart singing about pain, breaking for real, and silencing forever the explosive rhythm that once captivated the world. Damon Harris. Damon Harris, the piercing falsetto behind "Papa Was a Rollin' Stone," was a soul singer whose life ended after a 14-year battle with cancer, fought mostly in silence and solitude. He holds a unique place in soul and Motown history. Harris stepped into the Temptations during one of their most turbulent eras, taking over for the legendary Eddie Kendricks and shouldering immense expectations. What anchored him was his voice, soaring, razor-sharp, and unforgettable. That voice emerged at the haunting close of "Papa Was a Rollin' Stone," the Grammy-winning anthem that lifted the Temptations to yet another peak. The song told the story of a drifting father and carried an eerie sense of early death, loneliness, and quiet abandonment. Damon Harris was the one who gave that story its final breath. No one imagined that years later, his own life would echo the song's tragic undertones. In 1999, Harris was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and everything changed. The tours faded. The spotlight dimmed. In their place came hospitals, relentless treatments, and a slow physical decline. The fight stretched on for 14 long years, quiet, exhausting, and unforgiving, draining the strength of a man who once stood center stage in Motown's golden glow. Yet Damon Harris did not disappear. Instead, he chose purpose over retreat. He began speaking openly about his illness, especially to Black men who often avoid routine health screenings. He shared his story through outreach programs, awareness campaigns, and charity events. His suffering became a warning meant to save others. Still, fate showed no mercy. On February 18, 2013, in Baltimore, Damon Harris died at 62 alone. After his divorce, he had grown distant from his 6 children and 14 grandchildren. After more than a decade of resistance, prostate cancer reached its final stage and claimed his life in isolation. Many felt his death came far too soon, especially for a man who fought with such quiet determination. Obituaries could not ignore the cruel irony. The singer who gave voice to a song about a father dying alone ultimately left the world the same way. That coincidence cast a heavy shadow over his legacy. He didn't live a reckless life like the song's character, yet his ending carried the same haunting solitude, a stark reminder of life's fragility. Some believe that because Harris understood the song's meaning so deeply, he transformed his final years into a message about health, responsibility, and community. Today, "Papa Was a Rollin' Stone" is more than a Motown classic. For Damon Harris, it became a shadow that followed him to the very end. Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix. The ballad that seemed to predict his death 5 years in advance. Jimi Hendrix is remembered worldwide as the electric guitarist who rewrote the rules of rock. His sound was wild, untamed, and completely unbound by tradition. On stage, his performances were explosive, overwhelming crowds with raw power. In the studio, however, he revealed another side. Quiet, introspective, deeply thoughtful. Hendrix didn't just play music, he opened an entirely new door for rock, shaping generations that followed. Yet hidden beneath that brilliance was something few noticed at the time. Long before fame arrived, Hendrix quietly recorded a small, obscure song. No promotion, no spotlight, no ambition for the charts. It carried a chilling sense of foreknowledge. In 1965, when the name Jimi Hendrix meant little to the world, he recorded a track simply titled The Ballad of Jimi. It wasn't flashy or grand. It felt personal. Slow. Almost like a confession. In the lyrics, Hendrix sang about a man who knew his life would be short. A man who accepted it. Even more unsettling, he mentioned a specific number, 5 years. No metaphor. No disguise. Just a calm acknowledgement, as if he had already glimpsed the end waiting for him. Time moved fast. Hendrix was swept into the storm of global fame. One massive stage after another. Endless tours. Louder crowds. His music grew fiercer, more chaotic, more haunting. Behind the lights, though, his private life unraveled. Exhaustion, drugs, sleepless nights. The Smile audiences saw masked a body pushed beyond its limits and a mind that never truly rested. Then came 1970. Exactly 5 years after The Ballad of Jimi was recorded, everything collapsed. On September 18, 1970, in London, Jimi Hendrix was found dead in his hotel room. The official report concluded he died from asphyxiation after vomiting while under the influence of sleeping pills. When people looked back at the timeline, the coincidence sent chills through them. In 1965, he wrote about death. He emphasized 5 years. He sang as if he already knew his time was almost gone. And in 1970, precisely 5 years later, he was gone at just 27 years old. Not earlier. Not later. Exactly on that mark. For many, it no longer felt like random chance. They believed Hendrix sensed his own limit, not through logic, but through a quiet, persistent intuition. His death later became part of the infamous 27 Club, a gathering of brilliant talents lost too soon. But Hendrix's case stood apart. He didn't just die young. He spoke about it. He wrote it. He left traces behind. The Ballad of Jimi is no longer a forgotten recording. It has become one of the eeriest documents in music history, a cold prelude to its creator's fate. Today, when people listen to Jimi Hendrix's guitar, they don't just hear the explosion of rock. They hear a farewell written years in advance. A ballad not meant for the crowd, but for himself. Red Fox. The comedy king who died of a heart attack on set, while everyone thought it was a joke. Red Fox was a towering figure in American comedy, a pioneer of black humor who cleared the path for generations that followed. His legacy is forever linked to Sanford and Son, the smash TV series that ruled American living rooms in the 1970s. As Fred Sanford, grumpy, sharp-tongued, and endlessly sly, Fox had audiences howling with laughter week after week. But his most unforgettable bit wasn't a punchline. It was the heart attack gag. He'd clutch his chest, stagger dramatically, call out his late wife's name, and collapse as laughter erupted across the country. The routine became iconic, so familiar that it turned into pure reflex. Think Red Fox, and you thought of that moment. No one could have imagined that in 1991, the joke would turn deadly real. On October 11, 1991, Fox was on the set of The Royal Family, a new sitcom meant to mark his long-awaited comeback. The day unfolded normally. Lights blazing, cameras rolling, everything on schedule. Then, during a brief pause between scenes, Fox suddenly grabbed his chest and fell to the floor. It looked exactly like the act. For a few crucial seconds, no one panicked. Crew members hesitated. Some smiled. Everyone assumed he was improvising. Another familiar gag, another laugh coming. That hesitation, brief but fatal, created a deadly silence. Fox didn't get up. His breathing became uneven. His body went still. Only then did reality crash through the illusion. This wasn't comedy. This was a real heart attack. Violent, unscripted, and unforgiving. The set erupted into chaos. Paramedics were called. Fox was rushed to Queen of Angels Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center, but nothing could save him. That evening, Red Fox died at 68. A man who made millions laugh with fake heart attacks died from a real one. On a set, under studio lights, mistaken for his own joke. The cruel irony cemented his death as one of Hollywood's most haunting moments. His character was so deeply embedded in the public mind that when he collapsed, people saw Fred Sanford, not John Elroy Sanford, dying in front of them. Art and life collided, and there was no rewind. After his death, the royal family paused, then continued with major changes. But the chill of that day never faded. If help had come sooner, if reality hadn't been mistaken for performance, the ending might have been different. But time froze in that moment. Red Fox's story reveals the dark side of fame. When a role is played too well, it can erase the man behind it. He lived by laughs born from fake heart attacks, and he died because the world believed the image he created. Too poetic. Almost unbearably poetic. The godfather of horrorcore died just as his final nightmare, an album obsessed with death, was about to be released. Too Poetic was one of the architects who carved out horror rap as a dark countercurrent in early 90s hip-hop. Under the alias The Grim Reaper, he joined forces with RZA, Prince Paul, and Fruquan to form Gravediggaz, a group that brought an unervingly blackened tone to a scene that wasn't ready for it. Their album 6 Feet Deep became an unavoidable milestone, dragging graves, death, tortured souls, and madness straight into rap. No filters, no retreat. Too Poetic didn't use horror just to shock. He weaponized it to expose society's rot, transforming himself into a true underground horrorcore icon. And then, hauntingly, his life began to mirror the very images he once rapped about. On July 15, 2001, in New York City, Too Poetic died at just 36 from colon cancer. For months, the disease had silently eaten away at him. The pain burned inside his body like fire, his strength fading fast. The man who had screamed about death was now being hunted by it every single day. At the same time, his final album, Nightmare in a Minor, was nearly complete, finished, waiting, breathing. But he never lived to see it released. 5 weeks after his death, Nightmare in a Minor finally dropped. By then, it was no longer just an album. It was a farewell, his last voice recorded from the edge of life. The most chilling track, Burn Baby Burn, was written when the illness had taken full control. That searing heat inside his body poured directly into the lyrics. No metaphors. No escape. Horrorcore stopped being a style. It became a medical journal, a confession of a body collapsing in real time. Many believe Too Poetic knew exactly what he was facing when he wrote it. He didn't soften the truth. He magnified it, pushed it to the extreme, and forged his pain into his final piece of art. The cruel irony is impossible to ignore. Throughout his career, Too Poetic built the image of the Grim Reaper, rapping about death, restless spirits, and conversations with the afterlife, until it felt as if he had stepped fully into that role himself. His final days were spent in hospital rooms, cold and white like unmarked graves. Doctors pulling him back from death's grip over and over, while time slipped away. Village Voice and XXL both highlighted the same brutal irony. A rapper who dedicated his life to narrating death left the world precisely when his music reached its most painfully authentic expression of it. Too Poetic's passing turned his entire horrorcore catalog into a chain of eerie premonitions. Songs about graves and dying were no longer underground provocations. They became prophecy. He left too young, behind a legacy that is as disturbing as it is unforgettable. From Gravediggaz to Nightmare in a Minor, his life and art fused into one closed, tragic story, an ending that followed the dark script he had been writing all along. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge, the silver screen goddess who would one day be found collapsed alone in her apartment, dead from an antidepressant overdose. There was a time when her name could stop Hollywood in its tracks. She was a black woman of breathtaking beauty and undeniable talent, rising in an era when opportunity was largely reserved for white faces. Success was never meant to be hers, yet she took it anyway. Her breakthrough came with Carmen Jones, a daring film that shocked the industry with its all-black cast and still dominated the box office. The role made history, earning Dandridge a nomination for Best Actress, the first ever for a black woman. Overnight, she became a symbol of elegance, sensuality, and quiet defiance. Hollywood admired her glow, even as it struggled to accept her presence. But the brilliance of Carmen Jones faded quickly, and the shadows rushed in. On screen, Carmen was a woman who lived freely, loved fiercely, and died at the hands of a man who couldn't control her spirit. When the credits rolled and the applause faded, Dorothy stepped back into real life, into an industry that had no clear place for her. Roles for black women were scarce. Promises dissolved. Meetings ended without answers. Just as she believed she had reached the summit, her career began to stall. What followed was a slow unraveling. Money slipped away. Debts mounted. By 1963, Dorothy Dandridge, once a red carpet icon, declared bankruptcy. The woman who dazzled audiences now struggled simply to hold onto her apartment. Painful relationships, broken marriages, and unmet hopes piled on. The applause that once followed her had turned into silence. Loneliness crept in quietly, then settled deeply into her days. Depression took hold. Antidepressants became part of her routine. Nights stretched endlessly behind closed doors. Mornings arrived with no energy to face the world. Friends later said she still believed in one final comeback. One role that would prove she was more than a moment, more than a symbol. But Hollywood had already moved on, and time showed no mercy. Like so many of the characters she portrayed, Dandridge became a casualty of bias and a brutal system that celebrated her beauty while denying her longevity. She often played women who were desired but never allowed happiness, stories that mirrored her own. A trailblazer in life, yet isolated in success, she battled quietly until the weight became too heavy. On September 8, 1965, her West Hollywood apartment fell eerily silent. Dorothy Dandridge was found dead, naked, and alone. The official cause was an overdose of the antidepressant tofranil. To the public, her death felt less like an accident and more like a tragic inevitability, a haunting echo of the doomed women she so often played. Carmen longed for freedom but was destroyed by the forces around her. In life, Dorothy endured 2 failed marriages, abuse, financial ruin, and died with just $2.14 left in her bank account. She wasn't stabbed in a jealous rage like her famous character. Instead, she faded slowly, worn down by discrimination, loneliness, and an industry that never truly gave her a second chance. Her story remains one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking truths. A star who shone too brightly for her time, caught between history and cruelty, where the line between performance and reality disappeared entirely. Tupac Shakur. Tupac Shakur wrote lyrics that seemed to predict the bullet and the end. He remains one of hip-hop's greatest icons, a rapper, a street poet, and the unfiltered voice of a generation of Black America. His music wasn't about glitter or easy success. It stared straight into violence, racism, betrayal, and death waiting on the corners of the streets. Tupac left behind shattering albums, hundreds of razor-sharp verses, and an image no one could mistake. Live fast. Speak truth. Never dodge fate. He didn't just tell his life story, he turned his life into raw fuel for every record he made. In 1996, as tensions between hip-hop factions reached a boiling point, Tupac released the track N*****, Z Done Changed. It dropped barely 2 months before the attempt on his life. In the song, he described being shot, dying, and even claimed he could recount every detail. It didn't feel like metaphor or exaggeration. It sounded like a rehearsal for what was coming. By September 1996, Las Vegas was burning hot. On the night of September 7th, Tupac rode in a car with Suge Knight after a boxing match. Crowded streets, flashing lights, music still in the air. Then another car pulled up. Gunshots exploded without warning. Tupac was hit and slumped instantly. The scene unfolded almost exactly as he'd rapped it. There was nothing left to explain. Reality finished the verse. He was rushed to the hospital, suspended between life and death as machines beeped steadily. Outside, rumors moved faster than facts, whispers of revenge, conspiracies, and grudges never spoken out loud. On September 13, 1996, Tupac Shakur died at just 25 years old. The bullets didn't just kill a man. They froze an entire era of music in time. Yet even death didn't end the legend. In an unreleased Entertainment Weekly interview, Tupac once described a future scenario, 10 years down the line, where he'd be cremated, his ashes scattered, and his friends would smoke them mixed with weed. It sounded like dark humor, pure bravado. But after his death, members of the Outlaws actually did it. Part of Tupac's ashes were blended with marijuana and smoked in a private ritual, a final way to keep him close. Looking back, the death-soaked lyrics, the chilling talk of ashes, all line up into one straight, terrifying path. Tupac didn't just rap about violence. He lived inside it, accepted it, and seemed ready for the end. His death was exactly like his music, raw, painful, unavoidable, and haunting long after the last shots faded. Big L, farewell bars, and a bullet that sealed his fate in Harlem. He remains one of the most revered names in East Coast hip-hop. His career was brief, but his impact cut deep. Cold, unfiltered delivery. Street narratives sharp as a blade. He didn't rely on gimmicks or glossy images. Big L stepped into rap with raw truth, where guns, money, and death were never metaphors, just daily reality. His records moved through the underground like a warning shot. This voice was different. A pen so precise it could turn violence into lines that froze listeners in place. February 1999. Harlem wasn't quiet. The air felt heavy, the same tension Big L rapped into every verse. The streets he grew up on were no longer just lyrics or memories. They became the final stage. A car pulled up. Shots rang out in rapid succession. No time to react. No second chance. Big L fell in a drive-by shooting just steps from the block where he once played basketball, where he wrote his first rhymes, where dice games and danger blurred into routine. He had painted this scene before. Sirens screaming. Chaos closing in. A character realizing he's reached the final edge. After his death, those lines didn't sound like fiction anymore. They felt like prophecy, an exact description of his own last moments on Harlem pavement. When the bullet struck, it was fast and merciless, just like the rhythm he used to narrate the fates around him. Big L's death left hip-hop stunned. What he rapped wasn't bravado or empty threats. It was survival commentary from someone raised in the middle of violence. When he mentioned sirens, that was a daily soundtrack. When he spoke of heaven's gates, it reflected how death felt familiar to kids in the neighborhood. Years later, as his music replayed, listeners realized he wasn't imagining that ending. He was documenting a script everyone around him already knew. An artist who rapped about dying in the streets, and ultimately became the character in his own story. Harlem stayed the same. His music endured. And Big L exited this world exactly the way he described it. A brutal full stop to a talent that never made it out of the shadows in time. Dollar wrote lyrics about death that came true just 3 days later. Dollar was a young, promising figure in American rap, rising quickly with a clean image, a smooth, controlled flow, and a rare talent for storytelling. He wasn't flashy or reckless on the mic. Instead, he focused on narrating his own life through music, blending ambition, anxiety, and unsettling premonitions about the road ahead. Industry insiders praised his work, especially his ability to turn personal pain into vivid, emotional lyrics. To many, Dollar symbolized a new generation of rappers with real longevity, if he could escape the violence that constantly hovered around his world. That hopeful future unraveled in a matter of days. In early May 2009, Dollar released the track Georgia Nights. The song moved slowly, heavy and somber, like a late-night confession whispered in the dark. He rapped about restless sleep, cold sweats, and thoughts of leaving life by gunfire. It didn't feel like shock value or theatrics. It sounded exhausted, like someone who had grown up too close to gunshots, death, and the memory of a father lost to gun violence. Every line felt less like a verse and more like a personal reckoning. On May 15, 2009, Georgia Nights officially dropped. It passed quietly at first, just another release in a crowded market. 3 days later, everything changed. On the afternoon of May 18, 2009, the Beverly Center Mall in Los Angeles was operating as usual: bright lights, background music, shoppers drifting between stores. Dalla was there with friends. No stage, no microphone, no spotlight. Then a sudden argument erupted. Details remain unclear. Moments later, gunshots cut through the noise. Final. Dalla was hit and collapsed in the middle of the mall, an unthinkable place for a young artist who had just released new music to lose his life. Paramedics were called, but it was already over. He was only 21, the same age he referenced in his lyrics about good people dying young. As the news spread, Georgia Nights was pulled back into focus. Every lyric was dissected. Lines about gun violence, dreams of dying young, and fate mirroring his father's death suddenly felt chillingly precise. Not as supernatural prophecy, but as the grounded awareness of someone who understood his environment and how thin the line was between tomorrow and death. Dalla's passing shocked people not just because of where and how it happened, but because of how closely his music mirrored reality. 3 days, one song, a crowded mall, a single moment of violence. In this case, music wasn't fiction. It became the final record of a life cut short, where the rap didn't tell someone else's story, but quietly documented the artist's own ending. Blade Icewood. Blade Icewood. A man who stared death in the face and refused to blink. At the height of Detroit's Midwest underground explosion, Blade Icewood stood as one of the city's most feared and respected street rap figures. His gravel-heavy voice and ice-cold delivery painted vivid portraits of violence, money, revenge, and street conspiracies with brutal honesty. When an assassination attempt nearly ended his life, leaving him paralyzed and confined to a wheelchair, many believed his story was over. Instead, it only sharpened his legend. Surviving death didn't soften Blade Icewood, it hardened him. His presence grew darker, his words colder, his aura more dangerous. In his later recordings, he became the embodiment of a rapper unafraid to challenge mortality itself, standing in the shadows and daring death to answer back. Though his body was broken, his music gained even more force, echoing through a Detroit already boiling with tension. Feuds simmered, names were dropped in diss tracks, and the streets listened closely. It was in this climate that Blade Icewood released All to You. In one chilling verse, he declared, "If there's a next time, you'd better kill him." That single line landed like a signed death warrant, silent, final, and waiting for fate to fill in the date. From that moment on, everything changed. His appearances felt heavier. His lyrics carried real consequences. Early 2000s Detroit was no place for words like that, spoken so boldly. Still, Blade Icewood showed up. Still in his wheelchair. Still rapping about guns, hatred, and death lurking on every corner. Every song felt less like fiction and more like a first-hand confession. Then, in 2005, the line between music and reality disappeared. In another Detroit attack, Blade Icewood was shot and killed. This time, there was no survival. The bullets finished what the first attempt could not. Today, that verse is remembered with a chill. Not as coincidence, but as a moment where fate seemed openly challenged. Blade Icewood knew Detroit. He knew the rules. He knew exactly where he stood. And still, he chose the most dangerous path. To some, it was reckless. To others, fearless. But one thing is certain, Blade Icewood did not run from fate. He faced it head-on, named it, and dared it to respond through his music. We've just explored the haunting stories of 11 black stars whose deaths seemed eerily foreshadowed by their own work. What do you think of these chilling coincidences? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what's next. Together, we'll continue uncovering the hidden truths and dark corners of the art world that few dare to confront.